This demonstration features the special stitching techniques used in the construction of a tailored jacket. Chapter 1 Materials. Let's begin by reviewing the list of materials we'll need to use. Pins, needles, scissors of course, a white Prismacolor pencil, beeswax, white basting thread for loop tacks, tailor tacks, thread tracing and diagonal basting, 3/8 inch edge tape, self-colored sewing thread to match the wool for the cross stitch, feather stitch, and prick stitch, and finally tailor's chalk. Chapter 2 Thread Waxing. To avoid tangling, wax the thread before using. Draw the thread through the block of beeswax several times to coat the thread. Next, use a folded sheet of paper to blot the excess wax. Again, holding the needle, lay the wax thread between the folded paper. Place the iron on the paper to melt the wax as the thread is pulled through the paper. Repeat ironing a few times until there is no excess wax left on the paper, which could ultimately stain the jacket. Chapter 3 Loop Tacks and Tailor Tacks. Before construction begins, the wool cut pieces for the jacket are fused, then marked with wax white basting thread, which is visible on both sides of the wool. Loop tacks indicate the grain line, center front, hemline, plackets, and vents. Tailor tacks indicate notches and other crucial points for matching. Having placed the cut sleeves with right sides together, line up the paper pattern on the wrong side of the sleeves. Using a white Prisma pencil, transfer all the punch holes from the paper pattern onto the wool. Remove the paper pattern. With a ruler and tailor's chalk, follow the marks to chalk the grain line on the wrong side of the wool. Have several needles ready with double-threaded waxed white basting thread. Begin the loop tacks at one end of the grain line. Punch through both layers of wool, leaving a small tail. Take another stitch approximately 1/4 inch in front of the last one. Carefully leave about 3/4 inch thread slack between the stitches. Less than 3/4 inch of thread slack may lead to losing the thread marks. Try holding your finger on the thread as you pull it through to control the amount of slack. Continue stitching up the grain line on all cut wool pieces. You will see a line of loop stitches evolve as you progress. Begin the tailor tacks by stitching through both pieces of wool, leaving a small tail. Take another stitch in the same place on top of the previous stitch, leaving slack. This creates a single circular loop. Cut the thread, leaving a small tail. After completing the loop tacks and tailor tacks, peel the right sides of the wool apart as shown, gently tugging the slack out of the stitches. Clip evenly between the loop tack stitches with scissors. There will be a threaded fuzzy line of stitches on both sides of the wool. Follow the same process for the tailor tacks, pulling the slack and clipping between the right sides of the wool. This will leave a threaded fuzzy spot. Let's watch. After all the threads are clipped on the right side of the wool, you will see clearly marked grain lines, hemlines, plackets, vents, and tailor tacks for all your notches. You will see there is no slack left in the thread, and the stitches are clean and flat to the wrong side surface of the wool. Chapter 4, Thread Tracing. Another highly effective method of marking the grain line or the center front is thread tracing. Lightly chalk the line on the right side of the wool. Thread tracing is worked on the right side of the wool, as a long stitch is more obvious from the outside during construction. Use a single waxed white basting thread in the needle and begin by making 3 1/4 inch running stitches, leaving a tail. The next stitch is long, about 1 inch. Continue in this pattern, alternating short and long stitches. Chapter 5, Diagonal Baste. Diagonal basting is worked on the right side of the wool, catching through to the hymo beneath the jacket front. Use a single waxed white basting thread in the needle. Begin by taking a 1/8 inch horizontal stitch, leaving a small tail. Take another 1/8 inch stitch, about 1/2 inch from the horizontal stitch. This will automatically create a line of parallel diagonal stitches as you progress. Chapter 6, Prick Stitching. The prick stitch is virtually an invisible method of securing the pocket welt and lends a beautiful finish to the edge of a lapel or pocket flap. Use a single threaded needle with wax soft-colored sewing thread. Begin on the wrong side of the wool by anchoring the stitch between the welt and the wool. Bring the needle up in the welt seam near the corner of the pocket. Take a very small back stitch in the ditch of the seam, passing through the welt on the back. Bring the needle up in the ditch about 1/4 inch in front of the last stitch. Chapter 7, Cross Stitch. The cross stitch is used to connect the edge tape to the hymo interlining. Then it connects the other side of the edge tape to the wool. Use a single threaded needle with wax self-colored sewing thread. The needle will be pointed in the opposite direction to which you are stitching. See here how the bite of the stitch is very small, catching only the uppermost surface of the wool and edge tape. Alternate catching the wool and the tape. This will create an X pattern. Periodically, check the right side of the wool to be sure the stitches do not show through to the right side of the fabric. Chapter 8, Feather Stitch. Feather stitching secures the hymo to the lapel and undercollar and also helps to create a beautiful roll. Here you see the front of the 3/8 inch edge tape completed, including the roll line. The feather stitching will fill the lapel, becoming smaller in the corner. Turn the lapel to the right side and the feather stitching will show on the right side of the fabric. There will also be feather stitching on the undercollar and cross stitching across the border of the undercollar. Use a needle single-threaded with wax self-colored sewing thread. Feather stitching is worked on the top of the hymo through to the wool. Holding the needle horizontally, take tiny bites through the hymo and the wool in a vertical row, 3/8 inch apart. Begin the next row 3/8 of an inch away from the first row, alternating the placement of your stitch. The stitch in the row you are working will appear to angle toward the middle of the stitch in the neighboring row, creating a herringbone pattern.